Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the last video in my series of Spider-Man Commander deck techs. Spider-Man has a huge number of legendary creatures, so I wanted to showcase some of the coolest commander options from among them. I've released new Spider-Man Commander decks every Thursday through now, when the Avatar set is ready to drop, in addition to my usual Monday Commander deck tech videos. So if you want to see the Spider-Man decks I came up with, take a look at the playlist linked in the video's description. As you see, today our commander is Jackal, Genius Geneticist. Miles Warren was a biochemist and geneticist with an obsessive fixation on Gwen Stacy. After her death, he blamed Spider-Man and swore revenge on the Wallcrawler. And, like any reasonable person, that grief led him to learn martial arts, make himself a suit with razor claws, and mix his genes with that of a jackal to give himself superpowers. As we all know, the Bronze Age of comics was filled with characters who make good choices for their mental health. At least he got a cool card. So before we get into the deck tech, let's go over my deck building template. I always try to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why they're cool and why I put them in the command zone. So whatever they want me to do, I put 30 cards toward doing. That's my game plan, and it's how we try to win at the table. 30 more cards go toward supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction. I usually run 1 or 2 sweepers, sometimes more if it would play into my game plan, sometimes less if I don't really need it, if I just run 0. But I almost always stick to my floor of 38 lands so I can make sure I hit my land drops and cast my spells. So let's talk about our commander. Jackal, Genius Geneticist is a 1/1 legendary human scientist villain for just Simic mana, a green and a blue. Jackal has trample, and whenever you cast a creature spell with mana value equal to Jackal's power, copy that spell, except the copy isn't legendary, then put a 1/1 counter on Jackal. So in researching Jackal, I found myself not liking him. His fanatical devotion to Gwen Stacy, if you can call it that, doesn't just border on gross and problematic, he actually assaults Spider-Gwen when she arrives in the main Marvel universe. This is a guy without a lot of redeeming qualities beyond, I guess, his scientific skill. But as I read more, what stuck out to me was how he twisted his psyche into knots over Gwen's death. He knows it was Green Goblin who killed Gwen. See the heart of my video on Norman Osborn linked below. But he convinces himself Spider-Man is solely responsible because he didn't stop the Goblin. As in the fable of the Scorpion and the Frog, Jackal seems to believe that a villain isn't accountable for his villainy because it's in that villain's nature. Or perhaps he believes in a sort of natural order, in which every living thing, including people, has a role that they can't be faulted for fulfilling. If that were true, Green Goblin would have fulfilled his role as a dangerous maniac, but Spider-Man would have failed in his as a guardian of the innocent, and that's why Jackal devotes his life to getting revenge. This fundamentally fallacious worldview isn't as uncommon as you might think, but for someone who uses their biochemical knowledge to alter living beings and create new ones altogether, it's especially strange to believe in an inalienable natural order. Philosophy aside, we know that as awful as Jackal is, the emotion at the root of his terrible drive for vengeance is grief. He saw Gwen Stacy as something precious and irreplaceable, and, wrongly, as his. And we can imagine he sets out to undo her death by applying his mastery in genetics and cloning. After all, when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Our deck, therefore, isn't satisfied with only a single copy of each creature. We play our commander as soon as possible, then treat the mana curve as a blueprint for our success. We cast a 1-drop and we get another, then we cast a 2-drop and we get another, then a 3-drop and a 4-drop and so on. Even when all we get is a pair of 1/1 creatures, getting 2 for every 1 we cast is a lot stronger than it sounds. No one who's tried saving money at the supermarket doubts the power of the BOGO, and Jackal is no exception. But how do we hit the right draws to ensure the order of our creatures is in sync with our commander's growing power? Did we build a commander deck with a perfectly cultivated mana curve? Well, I tried to, but the real answer is that we have 20 spells with X in their casting cost, almost all of which are creatures. On the stack, whatever we set X to be contributes to the spell's mana value, so we can almost always meet our commander where he's at, getting a clone of our X spell and a counter on Jackal to prepare him for the next one. As I said, it doesn't matter how strong our creatures are when we get 2 of them every time, so it's to our advantage not to dump all of our mana into a single big Hydra. 2 are better than 1. We have plenty of ways to beef up our creatures and our commander as they enter and after they've hit the board, as well as cards that add counters and cards that proliferate the counters we already have. And when Jackal gets too big for his britches, we have spells that can remove counters from him for value, setting his sights a little lower so we can keep the cloning vats running. Honestly, playing this deck is more fun than winning with it, though that's not beyond our reach by any means. It's just fun to chain our creatures together, concatenating from one to the next, finding the exact progression that lets us take the most game actions. As usual with my decks, our turns don't take overly long, but with the way each of our creature cards seems to come with a copy token and another pip on Jackal's counters die, we do get some serious side eye from our fellow players. Before long, it feels like the table isn't groaning at our plays so much as groaning under the weight of them. Our playmat is crowded and covered in dice, and we always have one more spell to cast before we pass to the left. Our opponents can only watch with frustration, nudging each other and gesticulating as each creature lands, complaining that this is getting out of hand. Now there are 2 of them. You'll enjoy this deck if you like sequencing challenges that reward you with an ever-growing pile of value, or if you feel like big creatures covered in counters are so nice you'd like to play them twice. So as usual, this Moxfield page that we're about to go through is linked in the video's description. Below the deck list is a considering section full of cards that I considered putting into the deck and decided not to for reasons of budget, for reasons of synergy, because maybe they weren't just going for exactly what I was going for, but they might be exactly what you need because you have a bigger budget, a smaller one, or a different focus you want to choose for your build of Jackal Genius Geneticist. So take a look at that section, the considering section, if you want some ideas on how to build your own version. So we're going to start with the aforementioned X spells. We have a lot of these, and the best one to start with is Stonecoil Serpent. Stonecoil Serpent is an artifact creature, it's a snake, it's a 0/0, and it costs X. It has reach, trample, and protection for multicolored, so pretty sweet, and like so many of our creatures, it comes in with X +1/+1 counters on it. So when we cast Stonecoil Serpent, if our commander has no counters on him, our commander's power is 1, so we'll make X equal 1, and Stonecoil Serpent would come in as just a 1/1, but he will also trigger Jackal, making a copy of Stonecoil Serpent on the stack, which will resolve first. We'll get a 1/1 Stonecoil Serpent, and then we'll get another Stonecoil Serpent. So we'll get 2 1/1s that have reach, trample, and protection for multicolored. They're not terminally 1/1s because we have ways of putting counters on them, but all of this puts another counter on Jackal as well, which means the next time we cast something, it needs to be mana value 2, in order to get a duplicate of it and put another counter on Jackal. So Stonecoil Serpent is a great instance of a creature that comes in with X/1/1 counters on it that doesn't require any other pips of mana, as we'll see in a moment other things. So it's always going to live through this. We'll see what we mean in just a moment. But yeah, love the Serpent. Next is Capricopian. This is a 0/0 Goat Hydra for X and a green. So this is a good example of what I was just about to talk about. It comes in with X/1/1 counters on it, and we'll talk about this next part in a moment. So if we cast this for mana value 1, that means X has to be 0, because the green mana pip counts toward the mana value. It is not a terrible thing in this deck to cast a spell like Capricopian for X equals 0, just to make it mana value 1 spell, and thereby get a copy and put a counter on our commander, because we need our commander to start stepping up to higher mana values so we can get copies of bigger spells. That will mean that the Capricopian will get a copy, it will be at a 0/0 and die when it enters, and so will the Capricopian itself, but we have ways of getting creatures out of our graveyard, and even if we did not rather, having one of our creatures or 2 of our creatures die just to give our commander counters is not a terrible play pattern, because it sets us up for even better duplicated creatures that will survive their casting. So don't be shy about using cards like Capricopian with X equals 0, even if they would die from it, just to get our commander rolling. Our commander is a 2 mana creature, so it's very easy to get him started on turn 3. Maybe we cast the Capricopian at mana value 1, so X equals 0, just to make Jackal power 2, and then we've got 2 more mana since it's turn 3 to cast a 2-drop that likely will survive and also gets a copy, making Jackal a 3 mana or a 3 power creature ready for turn 4. All that to say, Capricopian enters with X/1/1 counters on it, and it has this really cool special ability. For 2 generic mana, it says put a 1/1 counter on this creature, and then you may reselect which player this creature is attacking. Only the player this creature is attacking may activate this ability, and only during the declare attacker step. So this is really sweet. We attack with the Capricopian. Let's pretend it's a 3/3 for right now. The defending player is allowed to activate this ability for 2 generic mana, putting a counter on it, making it a 4/4, and then they get to choose someone else for the Capricopian to attack. It can't attack us, obviously, because we control it, but it can attack one of the other players. So, pretty sweet. It's especially nice because this is a May. If they want it to be bigger for some reason, they can just put counters on it and not reselect the player that it's attacking. I don't know why they would, but it's a possibility. So yeah. Next is Contortionist Troop. I'm really glad I included this in the deck. It's really sweet. For X and a green, we get a 0/0 human that enters with X/1/1 counters on it. So similar situation to the Capricopian. If X equals 0, it's going to die when it comes in because it won't come in with any counters on it unless we have some other way to put them on it. But it also has a Coven ability. Coven abilities trigger if we control 3 creatures with different powers. 3 or more creatures, that is. This one says at the beginning of your end step, if you have Coven, then you get to put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. So assuming the Contortionist Troop survived its resolution, it's going to be able to put counters on creatures we control, assuming we have 3 power or more, or three different creatures with different powers. Which is sweet, because we can put those counters on Jackal and just sort of skip over, maybe we don't have any 3-drops in hand, but we have a 4-drop. We can, if the Contortionist Troop is one of 3 creatures that we have that all have different powers, we can put a counter on Jackal with that, and now we can cast our 4-drop on the next turn and get a copy of it with Jackal. Or we could just put the counters on the troop itself. That's not bad either. Next, we have Elusive Otter, which is an interesting inclusion in this section. Elusive Otter, if you haven't seen adventure creatures before, here's the way this works. It is an otter creature that if you pay the 1 blue mana casting cost, you get a 1/1 otter with prowess that says creatures with power less than this creature's power can't block it. That's sort of the floor of the otter, which is nice because it's a 1-drop. So if we have it in our opening hand, we can play this on turn 3 after we've played Jackal and immediately bump Jackal up. And of course, get an extra otter because it's copied. However, it also has an adventure, a sorcery called Grove's Bounty. For X and a green, we can distribute X/1/1 counters among any number of target creatures we control. So once the otter's on the battlefield, we don't care about the sorcery anymore. We can't deal with it. But we can't use it. We can deal with it, obviously. But when the card is in our hand, we can, if we choose, cast Grove's Bounty first, and as it resolves, it will be exiled, and we have permission to cast the otter from exile. So we can't cast the otter and then the sorcery, but we can cast the sorcery and then the otter if we want to. That's how adventures work. So Grove's Bounty is an X spell, but it lets us put counters on things. So this gives us a way to put, like I mentioned before with Contortionist Troop, put any number of counters we want, that we can pay for, of course, on Jackal to get Jackal's power to where we need him to be. We can also put it on our other creatures, of course, because we can just distribute them, and then we can cast our otter if we want to. Pretty nice. Next, we have Goldvein Hydra. Goldvein Hydra is X and a green for a 0/0 Hydra. It has Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, and it enters with X/1/1 counters on it. And when it dies, we make a number of tapped treasure tokens equal to its power. So again, it does feel sad if we have to play Goldvein Hydra with X equals 0 just to get Jackal to 2 power. But again, we have ways of getting creatures out of our graveyard, and ultimately, it's better to get him to 2 power than it is to sort of save up our Goldvein Hydra for a better situation, because more copies usually means better board states for us. It's worth losing an X and a 1 creature, or even an X and a 2 creature, that comes in as a 0/0 for us and just dies, as a way for us to get our commander more powerful. But it's pretty nice if we can get the Goldvein Hydra into play with X equals greater than 0, because then, if it dies, we get tapped treasure tokens. Next is Hormigaunt Horde. If I have mispronounced this, and you are a fan of Warhammer 40k, and you know how this is supposed to be said, let me know in the comments below. This is a 1/1 Tyrannid for X and a green with Ravenous. There's several creatures in this deck with Ravenous. Ravenous means it comes in with X/1/1 counters on it, and if X happens to be 5 or more, we draw a card when it enters. This is pretty sweet, especially because this is an X and a green creature with a base power and toughness of 1/1, so it's not going to die even if X is 0. But I will say this, it's important to recognize that for Ravenous, we draw a card not if this comes in with 5 or more 1/1 counters on it. We draw a card if X was 5 or more. If we set the value of X while we were casting the spell to 5 or greater, even if we have ways of, having a creature come in with double the counters on it or with extra counters on it, it doesn't matter how many counters it comes in with for us to draw a card. It matters what X's value was. Just worth mentioning. It also has the Endless Swarm ability. Whenever a land we control enters, so landfall, you may pay 2 and a green, and if you do, return this card from your graveyard to your hand. We just get to have the Horde back if we want to. This is sweet because we can play it early on, if we have it in hand, to get 2 copies of it and get a copy of it plus the original and help our commander get stronger with his counters. And then when it dies, we can put it back in our hand when we get our landfall trigger and cast it again for a higher value, getting another counter on it and helping our commander again. And maybe with that higher value, we get X to be 5 or greater, and we get to draw a card on the process. Pretty sweet. I do want to also mention that if X is 5 or more, and we're able to get a copy of it, the copy will enter and we'll draw a card, and then the original will enter and we'll draw another card. Good value. Next, from Wilds of Eldraine, we have Ingenious Prodigy. This is an X and a blue 0/1 human wizard. So again, if X is 0, it doesn't die when it comes in. It has Skulk, which means it can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. Pretty sweet. And it enters with, of course, X/1/1 counters on it. And at the beginning of our upkeep, if it has 1 or more 1/1 counters, we can remove one of those counters, and if we do, we draw a card. So repeatable card advantage as we make it a little smaller. But if we were to cast this for even X equals 2, let's say, and we get a copy of it, then we've got 2 creatures that during our upkeep, we just take a counter off them and draw a card. 2 cards every turn, at least for 2 turns. Ingenious Prodigy has done its job at that point, and it can keep skulking. Pretty good. Next, I really love this card in this deck. Jadelight Splunker is X and a green for a 1/1 Merfolk Scout that does not get counters on it equal to X. Instead, when it enters, it explores X times. To explore, essentially what you do, you reveal the top card of your library, and if it's a land, it goes in your hand. Otherwise, you put a counter on the Splunker, and that card can either go back on top of your library or into your graveyard. So a lot going on here. It feels like, the back on your library or graveyard feels like Surveil, but you're actually drawing a card if it's a land, and you're getting a counter as long as you didn't put a land in your hand. A lot going on with Explore. It's something that's easy to learn, but it feels weird until you've learned it. But not terrible. But so imagine that our commander has 3 power, and we cast Jadelight Splunker for X equals 2, so total of mana value 3. What will happen is we'll get a copy of it that will enter and explore 2 times, which may mean we draw 2 lands, and it just stays as a 1/1. And then our original one resolves, and we look at the top card of our library, and it's a creature, and we don't want it. So we put it in our graveyard, and the original one gets a counter, so it's a 2/2. Then the next card is, again, a non-land spell, but we want to keep it. So we keep it on top, and we get another counter, and our Jadelight Splunker's a 3/3. As opposed to so many of our other X-cost creatures, the copy we get from this may not end up being the same power and toughness as the original. But really nice to be able to get lands into our hand, and to give us a little selection as well as it gets counters. Next up is Nyxborn Hydra. Oh, this card is so cool in this deck. X and a green for a 0/1 enchantment creature Hydra. So again, doesn't die if X is 0. We'll get to the bestow in a moment. It has reach and trample, and it comes in with X/1/1 counters on it, no matter how we cast it. So if we cast this as a creature, it works the same way that we've been seeing things work so far. We just realize that if X is 0, it's not going to die because it has a toughness of 1. However, we can also bestow it for X and double green, which means if we cast it for its bestow cost, it's not a creature, so it won't trigger our commander even if its total mana value is the same as our commander's power. That's just how bestow works. It's an aura on the stack instead of a creature. But we can have it enchant our commander. That means it comes in, and it comes in with X/1/1 counters on it, and it says enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on this aura, and that creature has reach and trample. Now our commander already has trample, but getting reach is pretty nice. In addition, this is a way to increase our commander's power without just casting a spell of mana value equal to the commander's power already and getting 1 counter on it from his ability. We can increase his power as much as we can pay for with bestow, set him up for the next thing we want to cast, and we've got this Nyxborn Hydra sitting on top of him. And when our commander dies or bounces or in some other way, when Nyxborn Hydra becomes unattached, it just falls off and becomes a creature. It's not stuck as an aura forever. It will become a creature, and all of the counters on it are still on it, so it's a bigger creature than just a 0/1, presumably, and has reach and trample. This is really sweet in this deck. Just a nice way to titrate our commander up to where we need him to be. Next we have Wildwood Scourge. This is another X and a green for a 0/0. It's a Hydra, comes in with X/1/1 counters on it. But whenever one or more 1/1 counters are put on another creature you control that isn't a Hydra, you put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So as long as, again, Wildwood Surge survives resolving, it's going to get extra counters on it more and more and more as we put counters on our other creatures, as long as those creatures aren't Hydras. But our commander isn't a Hydra. So if we got our Wildwood Scourge, or maybe one and a copy of it, that one and the copy will get an extra counter every time our commander triggers his ability and gets a counter on himself. Pretty sweet. Next we have Aberrant. A little bit, we're getting into the challenging mana values here. So this is a 0/0 Tyrannid Mutant for X1 and a green, which means if we play this for 1 and a green, it's mana value 2, X equals 0, it comes in and it dies. That's unfortunate. Costs a little bit. But it does have Ravenous, so if we are able to pump mana into the X, and we want to, if we're able to get copies of it with our commander, then it will come in with X/1/1 counters, and if X is 5 or more, we draw a card when it enters. It has Trample, and it has Heavy Power Armor, which means whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we get to naturalize something they control, destroy an artifact or an enchantment. So pretty nice. It's very sad to try and say to our commander, okay, we're going to play this, I don't know, this Wildwood Scourge, X equals 0 just to give you a counter, and then we'll play this Aberrant, X equals 0 just to give you a counter, and then the Scourge and the Aberrant have both died in the process. But sometimes that's how we have to play it out. It gets our commander to where we need them to be for future turns. Luckily, though, we don't have that high of a chance of it playing out that way because we have such a nice curve. Next up, Benevolent Hydra. This is a 1/1 Hydra for X and double green, so again, not going to die even if X is 0. It comes in with X/1/1 counters, and if one or more 1/1 counters would be put on another creature you control, that many +1/+1/+1 counters are put on it instead. Just in case you didn't hear it, +1. So this just means any other creature, if it gets counters, it gets 1 extra 1. That includes when counters are put on it as it enters the battlefield, because that's you putting counters on a creature. It comes in with those counters, it comes in and those counters are put on it. So it's part of the same game action, but it does count for the Benevolent Hydra, so worth recognizing. Next is, this other ability, obviously. We can tap it and remove a counter from it to put a 1/1 counter on another target creature we control. This replacement effect affects this event. We put a 1/1 counter on another creature, but if we would do that, we put one more counter on that creature. So we're taking a single counter off the Hydra and putting 2 counters, at least, on something else. Next up is Broodguard Elite from Edge of Eternities. This is really cool. Broodguard Elite is a 0/0 Insect Knight for X and double green. Again, kind of awkward here. Comes in with X/1/1 counters, and when it leaves the battlefield, it puts its counters on target creature we control. So if it dies, if it's bounced, whatever, we get to keep the counters, and we just put them on something. Just one creature. We can't distribute them among our creatures, but still, one creature. However, it also has Warp for X and a green, and this is the way we want to use it in this deck. Warp means if we pay this casting cost, it comes in, and then at the end of turn, we exile it, and we have permission to cast it on a later turn from exile. Kind of like an adventure creature, except it has to be cast on a later turn with Warp. So the idea behind this is we pay the Warp cost, and if our commander says, our commander is like, hey, I've got 3 power, well then we'll say X equals 2, we warp it in, it's got power of 3, we get 2 copies of it, and then at the end of turn, both of those copies will leave the battlefield and put their counters on something else. The token will go into exile and just stop existing, but Broodguard Elite will continue to exist in exile, and we can later cast it for X and double green and maybe get to repeat our making of a copy of it, much the way that we did with one of these earlier. Oh, with Hormigaunt Horde, when we can just recur it and trigger it again later for a higher value. Next is a non-creature. It's Curse of the Swine. X and double blue for a sorcery that says exile target X creatures, and it's for each creature exiled this way, its controller creates a 2/2 green boar creature token. So our opponents lose their creatures, but they get pigs in the process. That seems pretty good for us. Next we have Hydroid Krasis. I would cast it for 10,004. Hydroid Krasis is a 0/0 Jellyfish Hydra Beast for X, a green and a blue. So again, kind of an awkward power and toughness versus casting cost. It does come in with X 1/1 counters on it. It has flying and trample, and when we cast it, so not when it enters. So we're not going to get to double this, even if the mana value is equal to our commander's power, because we're not casting the copy. This only happens for us for the original. But when we cast it, we gain half of X life and draw half of X cards, and we round down each time. So we want X to be at least a 2, so we gain 1 life and draw 1 card. If X was 3, we would still gain 1 life and draw 1 card. But we can get a lot out of Hydroid Krasis, especially if we're casting it later. Next is Ravener. It is X and a green and a blue, again with the awkward 0/0 power and toughness. It is a Tyrannid, and it has flash. And of course, this Ravener is ravenous. Makes sense. It also says when this creature enters, target creature attacks target opponent this turn if able. So the idea behind Ravener is we want to flash it in on our opponent's turn and force that opponent to attack someone with one of their creatures. Now, it will attack an opponent, and that does not mean, the creature's controller's opponent. Whenever a card that we control says opponent, it means our opponent. So they have to attack whatever creature we choose, and they can't attack us. So in a way, it's sort of like being goaded. And goad is a powerful mechanic. It protects us from the biggest, scariest things on someone else's board, and maybe even turns into removal, and likely will if we choose our targets well. And of course, if we get an extra copy of this, then we're going to get to choose 2 creatures to do that with. Next, we have Repulsive Mutation. For X, a green and a blue, we have an instant that says put X 1/1 counters on target creature you control. Great way for us to put our commander to the power we need based on the other creature spells we have in hand. And then counter up to 1 target spell unless its controller pays mana equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. Obviously, one of our creatures has just gotten bigger from that. Now, we don't have to. We could just say X equals 0, cast it for a green and a blue, and then whatever creature had the greatest power already is the amount of mana the spell's controller has to pay in order to have it not be countered. But that does either give them the spell they wanted, but they're down on a lot of mana, so they're not able to do other good things this turn, or it just counters their big spell. Pretty nice. The Goose Mother is next. This is a 2/2 legendary bird hydra. It flies for X and a green and a blue. So a non-awkward power and toughness and mana cost combination. It's getting that 2/2 from the green and the blue, kind of. So it comes in with X 1/1 counters on it, of course. And when it does, we make half of X as food tokens, rounded up. So if X is 3, we're going to get 2 food tokens. And then whenever the Goose Mother attacks, we can sacrifice a food, and if we do, we draw a card. So slower card draw than the Hydroid Krasis, but a lot more forgiving, and we can use these food tokens to draw to gain life if we want to. Next is Voracious Hydra, really fun. A 0/1 Hydra for X and double green with trample. This seems unfortunate, at least it's not going to die on its own, but actually, it comes in with X 1/1 counters on it, and when it does, we can choose to double the number of 1/1 counters on it. And if we don't, we can have it fight a creature we don't control. So Voracious Hydra, hopefully, is a removal spell for us. But if not, it's just a bigger Hydra than we paid for. That's pretty good, and so too will the copy be. We could, even if we want, since this only triggers when it enters, if we get a copy of this, we can have the copy get counters and the original fight something, or vice versa. Pretty fun. Last in this section is Tyrant Guard. This is a 3/3 creature for 2, a green, and X. It's a Tyrannid with Ravenous, of course. And it has Shield Wall, which says sacrifice this creature, and creatures you control with counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. So this is really nice as a way of protecting ourselves and protecting our creatures, as long as they have counters. And most of our creatures are going to have counters, but most especially our commander's going to. And if we get 2 copies of this, which is not hard to do because it has a power and toughness equal to its mana value even if X is 0, then we're likely to be able to just sacrifice the token copy. And if X was even 1, then the original Tyrant Guard gets hexproof and indestructible as well, since it would have a counter on it. Pretty good. That covers our X spells. Let's look at all the ways we can put counters on things. We've seen Contortionist Troop, and how if we have Covenant at our end step, we get to put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control. Elusive Otter lets us cast Grove's Bounty as a sorcery to distribute X 1/1 counters on our creatures. Wildwood Scourge, every time we have a non-Hydra get counters on it, we get a counter on the Scourge. And Benevolent Hydra, we can tap and remove a counter from it to put a counter, or really 2 counters at least, from its replacement effect onto another creature we control. Broodguard Elite as well, whenever it leaves the battlefield, either because it was warped or not, it puts its counters on other things. Next we have Combine Guildmage. Combine Guildmage is a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard for a green and a blue. For 1 and a green, we can tap it, and for the rest of the turn, each creature we control enters with an additional 1/1 counter on it. Additional, in this case, means in addition to however many it was going to get, which means if it was going to get 0, now it gets 1. That's pretty good. If we have multiple creatures come in, these are as they enter effects. So if we have the Guildmage in play, and we activate this first ability, and then we cast something with mana value equal to Jackal's current power, Jackal, of course, will get his counter, but both our original and our copy of the spell we cast are going to come in and each have an extra counter on them. Or we can pay 1 and a blue and tap it to move a 1/1 counter from a creature we control to another creature we control. This is a good way to take a counter off of one of our creatures and put it on Jackal to make sure his power is where we need it to be, or to take a counter off Jackal. If Jackal has, like, maybe we have 2 4-drops in hand, we play one of them, Jackal goes to 5 power, we want to get a copy of the other one, so we just take that counter we just put on Jackal off of it with the Combine Guildmage, and then cast the other 4-drop, Jackal will go back to 5, but we've got a copy of that second 4-drop, just like we did with the first one. Next is Power Conduit. It's a counters deck, so of course we're running Power Conduit. 2 generic mana for an artifact that says tap and remove a counter from a permanent you control, and then choose one. Put a charge counter on target artifact, or put a 1/1 counter on target creature. Just the same as we were talking about with the Combine Guildmage, Power Conduit lets us take counters off of our commander or put them on him. And yeah, if we really need to, I mean, this is not that bad, but if it turns out that our commander is the only creature we have in play, let's say, or we, for whatever reason, don't want to put counters on something else, we just want to take counters off, we can activate it, remove a counter from a permanent we control, and just put a charge counter on the Power Conduit. It's not going to do anything for us, but we can do it if we want to. And what's nice about that is we can later remove that charge counter, because this is a permanent we control, to put a 1/1 counter on something else. Just sort of store it for us. No reason not to activate Power Conduit basically every turn. We've seen Repulsive Mutation, actually. It lets us put counters on a creature and then maybe counter a spell. Next, we have our alternate victory condition. It's Simic Ascendancy. For X and a blue, we have an enchantment that says pay 1, for a green and a blue, my mistake. For 1 a green and a blue, we can put a 1/1 counter on a creature we control. That's another good way to put counters on things. But also, whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on a creature we control, we put that many growth counters on this enchantment. Growth counters are not, they don't have an inherent mechanical meaning, they're just used by this card. But it does say that many growth counters, as opposed to something like Wildwood Scourge that says anytime 1 or more counters are put on something, we put 1 counter on the Scourge. Simic Ascendancy lets us put the same number of growth counters on it. And it says at the beginning of our upkeep, if this enchantment has 20 or more growth counters on it, we win the game. So nice alternate victory condition in a tokens, or in a counters deck like this one, especially in our colors, and especially because it gives us a way to just pump mana into putting counters on our creatures, specifically our commander. Next, we have Zamek Guildmage. Zamek? Not sure. This is an older Ravnica thing. This is a green and a blue for a 2/2 elf wizard that is very similar to the Combine Guild Mage. It might be a little better. For a green and a blue, but not a tap. This turn, each creature we control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. Same thing as the Combine Guild Mage. Just doesn't have to tap for it. And then, for a green and a blue, and remove a 1/1 counter from a creature we control, we draw a card. So this, again, doesn't tap, but it doesn't move the counter, it takes it off entirely. However, it gives us a card in the process, and we can activate this multiple times, just like we can activate the first ability multiple times. So let's say we've got 4 extra mana lying around when we're about to cast a creature spell that has a mana value equal to our commander's power. We can activate this first ability twice. That creature and the copy of it will come in with 2 extra 1/1 counters on this since we activated it twice. And if we want, then we can remove one of those counters and just turn it into card draw. This is a very strong card in our deck. Lonus, Genetics Expert, is so much fun. I love Lonus. Lonus is a 1/2 legendary snake elf detective for 1 and 2 hybrid Simic mana. So we can, if you haven't seen this before, we can cast this for 1 and double green, 1 and double blue, or 1, a green and a blue. It has Evolve, which says whenever a creature we control enters, if that creature has greater power or toughness than this creature, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. So if Lonus comes in and then we play a 2/2, well, it doesn't have greater toughness than Lonus, but it does have greater power, so Lonus will get a 1/1 counter and become a 2/3. Pretty sweet. Whenever we put 1 or more 1/1 counters on Lonus, we also investigate that many times, which means we make a clue token. A clue token is an artifact that says pay 2 and sacrifice this, draw a card. And whenever we sacrifice a clue, we get to put a 1/1 counter on another target creature we control. Can't put it on Lonus, but Lonus is doing their best to give us clues as Lonus gets stronger and stronger. Interestingly, this is also from the clue set. Alright, next is Ornery Tumblewag, which completely overperforms in this deck. 2 and a green gives us a 2/2 Brushwag mount that says, on the beginning of combat on your turn, put a 1/1 counter on a creature. This is so good because it says, is your commander just 1 power too low to cast a good spell? Well, then cast your spell post-combat. Because at the start of combat, you'll put a counter on your commander, and then we can cast that spell and get a copy of it. Pretty good. Also, whenever this creature attacks while saddled, double the number of 1/1 counters on target creature. Now, saddle means we use this ability Saddle 2. So at sorcery speed, we can tap any number of other creatures that have a total power of 2 or more, and the Tumblewag will become saddled until end of turn. Saddled is just a condition it has, and the only reason we care about it is if the Tumblewag attacks. If it is saddled, we'll get to do the doubling of the counters on something. But even if it just had this ability, pretty alright. Next we have Sage of Fables. This is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 Merfolk Wizard that says each other wizard creature you control enters with an additional 1/1 counter on it. How many wizards are we running in this deck? We are running 6 wizards. So that's 5 other creatures beyond just Sage of Fables. For example, Zamek Guildmage is one of them. So Sage of Fables lets us put extra counters on our wizards when they come in, but also we can just pay 2 and remove a counter from a creature we control to draw a card. Exactly the same thing as Zamek Guildmage, but we don't have to pay colored mana to do it. So a nice way to remove counters from our creatures, or especially from our commander, to get his power down to where we want it to be, and just to have a source of card draw. Shapers of Nature is next. 1 a green and a blue for a 3/3 Merfolk Shaman that for 3 and a green we can put a 1/1 counter on a target creature. This is kind of expensive for this effect, but it's nice to have a little bit of redundancy. And for 2 and a blue and remove a 1/1 counter from a creature we control, we can draw a card. Again, this is just a more expensive but better power, but more expensive casting cost than the Zamek Guildmage, or a different way to look at the Combine Guildmage. It's just another source of these effects in our deck. It's also nice because it's a 3-drop, and these Guild Mages are 2-drops. We want to be able to have plenty of 3-drops so that we can get our commander triggered by our 3-drops, since we've already gotten past the 2-drop slot, since it's so easy to get past the 2-drop slot in this deck. Next is Signature Slam. 2 and a green for an instant that says put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control, then each modified creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. So a creature that is modified if it is equipped, if it has counters on it, or it is enchanted by an aura you control. For example, the Nyxborn Hydra bestowed on a creature. So all this really means is look at everything that has an equipment on it, has an aura on it, or has counters on it, put a 1/1 counter on any other creature you control, and then all of those creatures I just mentioned together deal deal damage equal to their power to a creature we don't control. So this is a pretty good kill anything spell, unless we just have a very small board, or somehow we don't have a lot of counters. Next up is Trommel, Seymour's Butler. Trommel? I'm not sure. I'm not a Final Fantasy guy. If you know how to pronounce Trommel's name, let me know in the comments below and tell me what their deal is. Anyway, Trommel is 2 and a green for a 2/3 legendary elf advisor that says each other non-token creature you control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it. That's so sweet. It means that independent of any sort of X value, all of our creatures that aren't tokens are coming in with a free counter, and we just love to be able to have those and to use them in the ways we were just talking about, like moving them around, eating them for card draw, however we need. In addition, we can pay 1 and tap Trommel to proliferate X times, where X is the number of non-token creatures we control that entered this turn. So essentially, we have Trommel in play, we cast a creature, and as long as we have 1 more mana, even if that creature comes in with just that single 1/1 counter, we can then pay that mana and tap Trommel to proliferate once, because that's the number of creatures we had that came in that aren't tokens. Proliferate means we look at any number of permanents and or players and then put 1 more counter of each kind that's already on them. So all of our creatures with counters, we don't have to proliferate on each of them, but we can proliferate on all of them if we want. And if we happen to have a turn where we get multiple non-token creatures in, activating Trommel means we get to proliferate multiple times, and that's great. Next we have Tyrannid Prime. Tyrannid Prime is 1, a green and a blue for a 0/4 Tyrannid with Evolve. So we've already seen Evolve, pretty nice. Tyrannid Prime comes in and it's a 0/4, which means as long as we have anything come in with a power greater than 0, Tyrannid Prime is going to get a counter. Pretty good. However, it has Synapse Creature, which says other creatures you control have Evolve. So this is really great as a way to put counters on all of our creatures, especially our commander. And if we have 2 copies of Tyrannid Prime, we have 2 instances of Evolve on all of our creatures, including Tyrannid Prime, because it says other creatures you control. But if we have a copy of Tyrannid Prime, that's giving other creatures, which includes the original Tyrannid Prime Evolve, in addition to its own initial instance of Evolve. The way that works, because Evolve, I'll just explain how this works. Imagine if Tyrannid Prime has 2 instances of Evolve, because let's say there's a copy of it in play as well. We then play a 1/1 creature. That 1/1 is going to come in and trigger Evolve twice, because that creature has greater power or toughness than Tyrannid Prime, because it has greater power. Then the first trigger is going to resolve, and we'll put a 1/1 counter on Tyrannid Prime. It will become a 1/5. The second trigger will resolve, and we will not put a counter on Tyrannid Prime, because when it tries to resolve, Tyrannid Prime has a power of 1, which is not less than the 1/1 creature we played. So this intervening if here is not going to trigger at all if the creature enters and it doesn't have greater power or toughness than this creature, and also it checks again when it tries to resolve if this is still true. So worth recognizing that multiple instances of Evolve will trigger multiple times, but that doesn't mean they always are going to put a counter on the creature for every instance that triggers. I want to say one other thing about Tyrannid Prime, and I had the rules pulled up, but they went away, so you're just gonna have to trust me on this, on how continuous effects work. I know you're wondering if Tyrannid Prime enters the battlefield, and we already have, let's say, a 1/1 in play. Tyrannid Prime has a greater power or greater toughness than a 1/1. So does that 1/1 have Evolve when Tyrannid Prime enters? And does Tyrannid Prime trigger that Evolve on the creature by entering? Does it enter first and then they get this ability? Or is it the other way around? The way it works is this. Tyranid Prime enters the battlefield, and this continuous effect goes into effect before anything that would trigger can trigger. That's how continuous effects work. They're always in effect once this is on the battlefield. And because of that, everything is going to have evolve when it sees Tyranid Prime enter, and therefore evolve is going to trigger if it would trigger by Tyranid Prime's 4 toughness. So, worth checking the rules for continuous effects and seeing how this works. It's not that difficult. I wish I could cite it for you now. I normally do that with the rules in these videos, but I guess not today. In any case, though, Tyranid Prime will trigger other creatures' instance of evolve that it gives them if they happen to have a toughness of less than 4 when it enters. So, next up is Defiler of Vigor. This is 3 and double green for a 6/6 Phyrexian Worm with Trample, already doing great. It has a big paragraph of text here that essentially means each of your green permanent spells treat one of the green pips like it's a Phyrexian green pip. That means we can cast it and pay an extra 2 life to cast it and reduce its cost by a single green. It can only reduce the green mana we would pay, but we're paying 1 less mana and 2 life instead. So this is really great because the ability to pay life in place of mana, so strong, especially if we're doing that in a way that lets us cast something with mana value equal to our commander's current power and get a duplicate copy of it. We're sort of paying 1 life per each mana for each of those creatures that we're getting. Very nice. In addition, whenever we cast a green permanent spell, we put a 1/1 counter on each creature we control. Each, very strong. Next up is the last one in this section, which is Colonian Hydra. Of course we're running Colonian Hydra. This is a 0/0 without X in its mana cost. It's a Hydra. So why doesn't it have an X? It's 3 and double green. Because it just comes in with 4 1/1 counters on it. Just comes in on its own. Has Trample, and it says whenever it attacks, double the number of 1/1 counters on each creature you control. Each! It's so crazy. If our commander is mana value 5 when we cast, or is power 5 when we cast this, we get 2 Hydras. They're both 4/4s because they both have 4 counters. We attack with both of them on our next turn. They both have a trigger. One will resolve, doubling them both to 8/8s. The other will resolve, doubling them both to 16/16s. We suddenly are attacking for 32 trample damage. It's just a good time in this kind of deck. Not to mention doubling all the counters on our other creatures twice as well. So that covers our counters here. We're going to look at a section I've called remove counters. It's just a way for us to take counters off of our creatures in order to get a little value off of them, or more importantly, like I've mentioned, titrate our commander to the right power we need in order to get more duplicates of the creatures we're casting. So we've seen Ingenious Prodigy. It can take counters off of itself in case we need that to happen so that we can draw cards from it. Benevolent Hydra can take counters off of itself as well to put counters on other creatures. Combine Guildmage, of course, we can move a counter from one creature to another. Like I mentioned, I'm not a Final Fantasy person, so I think this is Waka Traveling Merchant, but if I'm wrong, let me know in the comments below. And let me know what it actually is, and who this person is. What is their deal? Waka is 1 and a blue for a 1/2 legendary human citizen that says just tap and remove a counter from a non-land permanent you control to draw a card. Just a single tap. We don't have to pay any mana for this. We can only do it once per turn because it's a tap, but just very simple and just works really well in this deck for our 2-drop. Imagine having 2 of these in play. Remember, the copy that our commander makes is not legendary, so we can have 2. Just do it twice. We've seen Power Conduit. It can take counters off of things to put counters on other things. Zemet Guildmage can take 1/1 counters off of our creatures to draw cards. So can Sage of Fables, and so can Shapers of Nature. Next we have Kogla the Titan Ape. Very interesting in this section. So Kogla is a 7/6 legendary ape for 3 and triple green. It says when it enters, it fights up to 1 target creature we don't control. Immediate removal. When it attacks, destroy target artifact or enchantment defending player controls. A free naturalize. That is already pretty great for this big ape. However, we can also pay 1 and a green and return a target in order to return target human we control to its owner's hand, and Kogla gains indestructible until end of turn. I can mention this. Jackal, even though he doesn't look like it, is a human. It's got Jackal DNA, but also human DNA, so he counts as a human. He's got the human type. So when Kogla enters, when this fight trigger goes on the stack, we can activate this ability and bounce one of our humans, maybe Jackal, and give Kogla indestructible. So even if he would die from the fight, he's now indestructible and he won't. That's pretty nice. But I put him in this section, not to mention other sections, because sometimes we might want to just reset Jackal. So this is a good way to do so, and it gives us the indestructible as well, but for 2 mana, we could just bounce Jackal and then replay Jackal for 2 mana. We don't have to pay the commander tax since he's in our hand, and he comes back in as a 1/1 creature, so we can start our chain all over again. Pretty nice with Kogla in play. Finally, we have Hierophant Biotitan. For 10 and double green, we get a Tyrannid that is a 12/12. It has a Frenzied Metabolism, which is to say, as an additional cost to cast it, we may remove any number of 1/1 counters from among creatures we control, and it costs 2 generic mana less to cast for each creature removed this way. So if we remove 5 counters from among our creatures, it's a 12/12 for just double green. This cost reduction does not change its mana value. So we are not going to get to make a copy of this with our commander unless our commander is a 12/12 when we cast the Biotitan. But that's not too far out of reach for Jackal. Anyway, we've got him in this. We've got the Biotitan in this section because this is a good way to take counters off of Jackal and reduce it by maybe just a little bit, or just a few counters off of Jackal and some more off of our other creatures to get it all the way down. Anyway, this lets us It lets us get Jackal's power where we want it to be. In any case, it's a 12/12 with Vigilance, Reach, and Ward 2, and it can't be blocked by creatures power 2 or less. So a little bit of evasion, it protects itself, it can block flyers, and it can block everything after it's attacked because it attacks with Vigilance. This is really cool. That's it for our remove counters section. We have one more of these kind of sections, and it's extra counters. So we've got some fun stuff to talk about here. We've seen Benevolent Hydra. Let's talk now about Kami of Whispered Hopes first. Kami of Whispered Hopes is 2 and a green for a 1/1 spirit that has the same text that Benevolent Hydra has. This text, where if something would get a 1/1 counter or any number of 1/1 counters, it gets that many +1 of those counters instead. This is called Hardened Scales. It's just the name of the enchantment that we have named this effect after. It ensures we're always going to get an extra counter if any number of counters are put on something. And the Kami taps for an amount of mana of any one color equal to its power. So if we're somehow able to get a counter on the Kami, it's going to tap for more mana. But if we put 1 counter on the Kami, it's going to see that 1 counter be placed, and it's going to put an extra counter on, so it'll become a 3/3 rather than a 2/2. So now it taps for 3 mana. This can really get great for us. And if we cast this when Jackal has 3 power, we get 2 Kami. Even if they don't come in with counters, we now have 2 1/1s that tap for mana. That's pretty good for us. If we have a Benevolent Hydra and a Kami of Whispered Hopes in play, or maybe 2 Kamis or 2 Benevolent Hydras, their effects will stack. So 2 Kamis, if we try to put a 1/1 counter on something, we're going to put an extra counter and then another extra counter for the other Kami. So 1 counter becomes 3 because we're just doing 1 + 1 + 1. That's the same if we had a Kami and a Hydra. That's how it works. Branching Evolution is 2 and a green for an enchantment that says if 1 or more 1/1 creatures would be put on a creature you control, twice that many are put on that creature instead. So this isn't add 1, this is multiply by 2. So I know you're thinking, this sounds pretty good. Well, but it's not a creature, so we can't get doubles of it with our commander. But it is pretty good for 3 mana. But I know what you're probably thinking even more is, well, what happens if we have a Kami and a Branching Evolution in play, or Benevolent Hydra and a Branching Evolution? Do we add 1 and then multiply by 2, or do we multiply by 2 and then add 1? What order does it happen in? Because these are both replacement effects, we get to choose, since our creature is the one that's going to be affected by it, because they both say put 1/1 counters on a permanent you control or a creature you control. So we get to choose, and we might want to choose to do it either way. Let's say we're putting 1 counter on a creature. Branching Evolution, if we apply it first, will double that 1 to 2, and Kami we'll add 1, making it 3. Maybe that's where we want it to be. Or if we want to apply the Kami first, that 1 counter will add 1 to it to make it 2, and then Branching Evolution will double it to 4. So that's more, but we don't always want it to be more in this deck. Sometimes we want to put a certain number of counters on our commander to get his power exactly where we need it to be for the next creature spell we're casting, so we can get 2 copies of that creature spell. And if that's not what we're trying to do, then yeah, go hog wild, put as many counters on as you're able to. Do the Hardened Scales effect before you do the doubling effect. Very nice. And it can definitely get out of hand when you have all 3 of these cards in play, or multiple copies of the Kami or the Hydra and a Branching Evolution. Eventually, you stop having to worry about doubling your creatures and just start thinking about having an enormous number of counters on your creatures and attacking with those massive, massive beasts. And if you have Kogla, just reset your commander and start it all over again. So that covers the sections that I think as being most of our game plan. We are going to start talking about the supplemental sections of our deck list. But first, we want to talk about the support sections. We're going to start with card advantage, which, as usual, I have tagged here as draw. That doesn't mean all of these cards draw us a card. I'm just using draw as a shorthand for card advantage. So, for example, Hormigaunt Horde has Ravenous. It can draw us a card if X is 5 or greater. Ingenious Prodigy can eat counters off of itself in our upkeep to draw us cards. Aberrant can... it has Ravenous, so again, it can draw us cards that way. Hydroid Krasis will draw us cards that are equal to half X, whatever the X value is, rounded down. Waka lets us remove counters from non-land permanents we control to draw cards. Ravener, of course, has Ravenous. The Goose Mother lets us sacrifice food when it attacks so we can draw cards. Zemet Guildmage lets us take counters off of creatures to draw cards. Next is Aether Channeler. Aether Channeler is a 3-drop. It's a 2/1 human wizard. It's a wizard. That's relevant for our Sage of the Falls. For 2 and a blue. When it enters, we can either make a 1/1 bird, we can bounce another target non-land permanent, or we can draw a card. So Aether Channeler is in here because it's so flexible. We might want this bird token. That would be okay. If we get 2 copies of the Aether Channeler, each one can make us a bird. Or each one can bounce something. This is a removal spell as well. Or each one might draw us a card. Or we might have one Aether Channeler do one thing, and the copy do something else. Pretty good for our 3-drop slot. Speaking of 3-drops, this is not something we can duplicate, but it's Garruk's Uprising. For 2 and a green, this does 3 things. It gives all of our creatures trample, so this is really great for some of our really big creatures or our X creatures that don't have trample. This just lets us get in. When it enters, if we have a creature with power 4 or greater, we draw a card. And whenever a creature with power 4 or greater enters, we also draw a card. That counts if we have a copy that was made on the stack by Jackal. If that comes in, we're going to draw a card for the copy, and then the original will come in and we'll draw a card for the original as well. So Garruk's Uprising will give us an awful lot of card advantage over the course of the game, in addition to giving our creatures trample. We've seen Lonus, and how Lonus can make us a bunch of clues, which we can sacrifice for card draw. Not Sage of the Falls like I mentioned before, but Sage of Fables. Sage of Fables lets us take counters off our creatures to draw cards. So does Shapers of Nature. Next we have Terra Symbiosis from Edge of Eternities. For 2 and a green, this is an enchantment that says whenever you put 1 or more 1/1 counters on a creature you control, you may draw that many cards. Do this only once each turn. Do this only once each turn is part of the may. So what that means is let's say we're going to have a turn where we put a single 1/1 counter on our commander and then 3 counters on one of our other creatures. Terra Symbiosis will trigger for our commander, and we may draw that many cards, and we choose not to, because it will trigger again when our next creature comes in. We put 3 counters on it, and we'll say we do want to. We can only do it once each turn, but it doesn't have to be the first time. It just means once we've done it once, we can't do it again during that turn. But if we know how our turn's going to play out, which is not hard to figure out in this deck, you can figure out the best way to draw the most cards that we're able to. Tyrant Guard has Ravenous, can draw a card. We are running Beast Whisperer. I don't usually love running Beast Whisperer in my decks. It's a good card. For 2 and double green, it's a 2/3 Elf Druid that says whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. This is a cast trigger, not an enters the battlefield trigger like something like, I think Primordial Sage is an enters trigger. So that would be a lot nicer in a deck where we have duplicates of our creatures entering, but it also costs 2 more mana, and we wanted something in the 4-drop slot. So Beast Whisperer is pretty good, especially if we can get 2 copies of it if we cast it when our commander's power is 4. Next we have one of my favorites. It's Nylea Keen-Eyed. Nylea is 3 and a green for a 5/6 legendary enchantment creature god with indestructible. However, as long as our devotion to green is less than 5, Nylea isn't a creature. Devotion means we look at all of the permanents we have in play and we count up the green pips in their casting costs. That is our devotion to green. So if we had, let's say, this line of creatures in play, our devotion to green is 2 because Nylea has 1 green pip and Sabsunin has 1 green pip. Our devotion to blue is also 2 because Sabsunin has 1 blue pip and Muldrifter has 1 blue pip. Solemn Simulacrum doesn't have colored mana in its cost, so it's not adding to our devotion. So if Nylea is not a creature, Nylea is just a legendary enchantment, and therefore can't attack or block. It still is indestructible, but all it's doing is providing its abilities. But as soon as we are able to get our devotion up to 5 or more, Nylea is now a creature, and we're able to attack and block with her as much as we want. I know she's an enormous god, and I know she has a bow and arrow, but she doesn't have reach. Don't question it. Nylea says creature spells we cast cost 1 generic mana less to cast. Like I mentioned before, this does not change that creature spell's mana value. It just changes its mana cost, the amount we're having to pay in order to cast it. The mana value stays the same. So really nice to happen for all of our creatures, and if we can cast Nylea as our 4-drop, when Jackal has a power of 4, we get 2 Nyleas, one of which isn't legendary, so all of our creatures are discounted by 1 twice. Pretty nice. And if that weren't enough, for 2 and a green, we can reveal the top card of our library, and if it's a creature, we put it in our hand, otherwise we may put it in our graveyard. This deck is running 50 creatures. That includes Jackal and Nylea, of course, but 48 other creatures in our deck means we've got an awful lot of chances for the top card of our library to be a creature, and basically we just get to draw it. It's revealed, but that's fine with me, because we can cast it for a generic mana less. Next, we have Solemn Simulacrum. The Sad Robot is a 2/2 for 4 generic mana. It's an artifact creature golem, and when it enters, we Rampant Growth. We search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. When it dies, we may draw a card. So another great 4-drop to hit when our commander is power 4, because it lets us find 2 lands. And then when each of the Sad Robots dies, we get to draw a card off of it. Muldrifter is very cool in this deck. Muldrifter is a 2/2 elemental for 4 and a blue. It flies, and when it enters, we draw 2 cards. That's already a pretty good rate. It's not the hugest, power and toughness, but we have ways of putting counters on things, and in any case, it comes with 2 cards. This is a Wind Drake and a Divination shoved onto each other, and it costs 1 less than the 6 mana those would cost. However, Muldrifter also has Evoke for 2 and a blue, which means we can cast it for its Evoke cost. It's an alternate casting cost, and if we do, it's sacrificed when it enters. So the Muldrifter doesn't get to live, but we do get to draw the 2 cards because it entered. This is nice because we can fit Muldrifter, therefore, into our 3-drop slot or our 5-drop slot. If we cast it while our commander has power 3, we can evoke it, and we'll get an extra Muldrifter. Now, both of those Muldrifters, both the token copy and the Muldrifter, the original one, will be evoked, so they will be sacrificed when they enter, but they will also both draw us 2 cards. So that's us paying 3 mana to draw 4 cards and have a counter be put on our commander. Seems good. Next, Sabsunin. Love Sabsunin. A 6/6 legendary god for 3, a green, and a blue. This is an Amonkhet god as opposed to Nylea, which is a Theros god, so it works a little differently. This 5-drop has reach, trample, and indestructible, and is a 6/6. Already I'm pretty happy with it. But Sabsunin can't attack or block unless it has an even number of counters on it, and 0 is even. So that means when Sabsunin comes in, assuming we don't have an effect that puts counters on our creatures when they enter, Sabsunin can attack and block. However, at the beginning of our first main phase, on our next turn of course, we'll put a 1/1 counter on Sabsunin, and then if it has an odd number of counters on it, we draw 2 cards. So either we've got a big creature that's got reach, trample, and indestructible, or we have a creature that can't attack or block, but we're drawing 2 cards each turn. This is so sweet. Just being able to have these counters on Sabsunin, maybe remove them if we need to for value, maybe move counters onto Sabsunin to make her bigger. Just love this frog. And that covers our card advantage section. We're going to talk now about acceleration, which again I've just tagged as ramp for a shorthand. Goldvein Hydra, as we've seen, when it dies, whatever its power was, we get that many tapped treasure tokens. We're playing Llanowar Elves, of course, with the Dominaria 2018 art. This is a 1-mana 1/1. It's an elf druid, taps for green. Pretty good. Just a nice way for us to trigger our commander when he has no counters on him, put a counter on him, get a second Llanowar Elves as well, and now we have ramped ourselves beyond just playing a mana dork. We've paid 1 green for 2 mana dorks, so we've turned 1 green into 2 green that we get to keep as long as they live. Magus of the Vineyard is another 1-drop for 1/1. It's a human wizard. It's a wizard, maybe relevant. Also triggers our commander when he has no counters on him. And it says at the beginning of each player's first main phase, that player adds 2 green. So this helps everyone at the table. No one can be mad at us for going crazy with our copying, because everyone's getting 2 free mana at the start of their turn. Even if they can't use green mana in their deck, they can use it as generic mana or use it for generic mana costs. But for us, we're getting 2 green mana that we can use for things in our colors. So pretty nice. It is Sol Ring. It's in our commander deck. Of course we want it. Costs 1. It's an artifact. Taps for 2. Colorless. It just accelerates us so powerfully. It's the symbol of the format. We love Sol Ring. We also love Arcane Signet though. It's a 2-mana rock that comes in untapped and taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity. So it's an untapped 2-mana rock that taps for green or blue. Pretty good. Next is Gyre Sage. 1 and a green for a 1/2 elf druid. It has Evolve. We've seen Evolve before. It also taps for 1 green for each 1/1 counter on it. Not for its power, for each counter on it. So Gyre Sage doesn't actually tap for mana until it has evolved or until we've put counters on some other way. But being able to have 2 of these, and maybe eventually we have multiple counters on them, that means we have creatures that are tapping for multiple mana each time. That's pretty great. We're running Cultivate. Cultivate is 2 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search for 2 basics, reveal them, put 1 in our hand and the other on the battlefield tapped. So it's Lay of the Land and Rampant Growth together. Just helps us hit our land drops, but also ramp up a little bit. Don't like to run Cultivate in this deck because we want to be able to hit, our 3-drop on our turn 3 or our turn 4 at least. But if we are hurting for mana and we've got 3 and a Cultivate in hand, it's worth playing. We've seen Kamiya Whispered Hopes. It's another mana dork. Next we have Arixmathes, Slumbering Isle. This is so cool in this deck. This is a 12/12 legendary Kraken for 4 mana, 2 a green and a blue. It enters tapped with 5 slumber counters on it, and as long as it has a slumber counter on it, it's a land. It's not a creature. It taps for a green and a blue, whether it's a land or a creature. That's 2 mana. And whenever we cast a spell, we may remove a slumber counter from Arixmathes. So we want to get these counters off of Arixmathes so we can have our 12/12. But while we have the counters on it, it's a land that taps for 2 mana, 1 of each color. And even once it's a creature, like I mentioned, it still taps for mana if we want it to. But this is really nice because this ability functions on the battlefield, which means Arixmathes on the stack is a creature. So Arixmathes can be duplicated by our commander. If our commander has 4 power when we're ready to cast Arixmathes, we want that to be the case because this is so cool. We will get a copy of Arixmathes that is not legendary. It will enter tapped with 5 slumber counters on it, and it will be a land. The original will enter after that, and the same thing will be true. Then, from then on, we can tap our 2 Arixmathes for 2 mana each, and every time we cast a spell with that mana or in any other way, we remove a counter from both of them, and eventually we have 2 12/12s that still tap for mana if we need them to. Love Arixmathes in this deck. We've seen Nylea, how Nylea can reduce our creature spell cost by a generic mana. Sad Robot. finds us a basic, tapped, it's Rampant Growth. And of course, Defiler of Vigor lets us cast our green permanents with life rather than a single one of their green pips. So good acceleration there as well. That covers our acceleration section. Let's look now at our interaction, which again, I just tag as removal for as a shorthand. We have another 1 mana creature to hopefully get our commander past the hump of not having any counters on him. For a single generic mana, we have a 1/1 artifact creature insect called Haywire Mite. When it dies, we gain 2 life, and we can pay a green and sacrifice it to exile target non-creature artifact or non-creature enchantment. If it's an artifact creature or an enchantment creature, we can't get it, but as long as it isn't a creature, we get to do a little bit better than disenchanting, or naturalizing, I guess, with green, because it's an exile effect. And of course, it's been sacrificed, so at that point, it dies and we gain 2 life. Good little mite. Nice to have 2 of them, too. Aberrant, of course, whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we get to naturalize, destroy an artifact or enchantment that they control. Curse of the Swine lets us exile X creatures and give those creatures' controllers pigs. Ravener, when it enters the battlefield, target creature attacks target opponent this turn if able. Not exactly a removal spell, but we can set it up to be one. If someone has a creature that an opponent of theirs can just eat, they probably will. So we'll choose when the Ravener enters, we'll choose that creature. They'll be forced to attack with it because it will be flashing it in on their turn, of course. And then whichever opponent they're attacking will eat that creature. Or maybe there will be a good trade available to be made. This is something we might even politic to try and get someone to say, like, look, sacrifice your creature when that one attacks, and we don't have to worry about it anymore. I can force them to attack with the Ravener. Next is Repulsive Mutation. Of course, it lets us counter a spell, in addition to putting counters on one of our creatures. Voracious Hydra, when it enters, it can fight a creature we don't control. Ether Channeler, when it enters, can bounce a non-land permanent. Signature Slam can do a whole bunch of damage based on our modified creatures to a single creature an opponent controls. Kogla comes in and fights a creature, but also attacks and destroys artifacts and enchantments. And finally, we have Hullbreaker Horror. It was just a good option for our 7-drop slot. 7/8 Kraken Horror for 5 and double blue with Flash. It can't be countered, and it says whenever we cast a spell, any spell we cast, anyone, we get to choose up to 1. Either return target spell we don't control to its owner's hand, or return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. The second option does not say we don't control. So we can bounce our own things if we want to with this. Nice way to maybe reset the same way we would with Kogla. I just didn't think it was going to happen as much with the Hullbreaker Horror, so I didn't, code the horror, tag the horror that way, but you're welcome to if you want to. In all likelihood, we're not likely to do this because we don't have a lot of things we can cast at flash speed, just 2 instants. But being able to cast any time we cast, or to get an effect anytime we cast a spell that bounce one of our opponent's things, if we shoot for their really expensive spells, they're going to have to spend a lot of mana recasting them. If we hit things that don't have good enters the battlefield triggers or leaves the battlefield triggers, they're not getting any value off of it. Yeah, we can certainly slow our opponents down with this. Next, we have 1 Wrath in this deck. It's Wave Goodbye. Wave Goodbye is 2 and double blue for a sorcery that says return each creature without a 1/1 counter on it to its owner's hand. So this is, maybe not all of our creatures are going to have counters on them, but a lot of them will, especially our commander. And some of our opponent's creatures are going to have counters on them, but most of them won't, unless they're playing a counters deck like us, in which case, good for them. But sometimes Wave Goodbye ends the game for at least one player, because it leaves our board with all these huge creatures covered in counters in place, and just gets rid of all the creatures on someone else's board, which means they can't attack, or they can't block this turn, and we just slam right in. Wave Goodbye is one of many board wipes that only removes some creatures or some of the permanents in play. Like sometimes it leaves legendaries behind, or it leaves tokens or non-tokens behind. This one just leaves behind creatures with counters on them. But for 4 mana, I think it's pretty useful. So that covers our support sections. We're going to go through our sections of supplementation, starting with our evasion cards. We've seen Garruk's Uprising, giving all of our creatures trample, and we haven't seen either of these. So let's talk about Herald of Secret Streams. Herald is 3 and a blue for a 2/3 Merfolk Warrior that says creatures we control with +1/+1 counters on them can't be blocked. Just unblockable. Doesn't matter what our opponents have. Now, we want to be careful with this, because if we attack with all of our unblockable creatures, and before blockers are declared, our opponent removes the Herald, then suddenly all of our creatures we thought were going to go unblocked won't. So what's nice is being able to cast the Herald as our 4-drop, when our commander, of course, has power 4, and we get an extra Herald. So they have to remove 2 of our creatures in order to keep us from attacking unblockably with our counter-covered creatures. Next, we have Trigon Prime. 2, a green and a blue, for a 4/4 Tyrannid with Subterranean Assault. It says when it attacks, put a 1/1 counter on it and a 1/1 counter on up to 1 other target attacking creature. That creature can't be blocked this turn. So this is sweet as a way to put counters on things, and I'm kind of surprised it doesn't have the counters tag. Oh, it does. Did I just miss it earlier? Have I already talked about it? Good question. Anyway, Trigon Prime, when it attacks, it's going to get a counter, and something else is going to get a counter and be unblockable, which may be our commander. What's better than trample on our commander? It's being able to do unblockable commander damage. But it's also especially nice if, when our commander has 4 power, we cast Trigon Prime and get 2 copies of it. So we attack with both of them. They each put a counter on themselves, becoming 5/5s, and on each other, becoming 6/6s. And since they put a counter on each other, neither can be blocked. So we attack for 12 damage. The next turn, they do it again, and we attack for 16 damage. We've done 28 damage over the course of 2 turns, and we did it because we cast a 4-mana spell the turn before that, the first of those 2. So Trigon Prime can really get out of hand when we do it that way. I do want to check to make sure that we didn't miss it in our counters. Oh, we absolutely did. I'm so sorry. Let me tell you about a couple more of these. We saw Trommel, we saw Tyrannid Prime, and I just skipped to the Defiler of Vigor. Oh, because I saw the Prime in both ones. My mistake. Well, I'll tell you right now about Forgotten Ancient, because Forgotten Ancient, hate to miss this one. The playtest name for this card was Mr. Baby Cakes, so that's what I call him. Mr. Baby Cakes is 3 and a green for an 0/3 elemental that says whenever a player casts a spell, you may put a 1/1 counter on this creature. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may move any number of 1/1 counters from this creature onto other creatures. So this is whenever a player, so any of the players in the game, cast a spell, so any spell. Forgotten Ancient, by the time it gets back around to our next upkeep, after we've cast the Forgotten Ancient, it might have 10 counters on it. It might have a lot. And then at that point, we can move any number of counters onto other creatures. They don't have to be our creatures even. We can make political deals and say, hey, look, do you want 5 counters on your big creature? I'm happy to put them on there if you leave us alone for a turn or 2. But in all likelihood, what we're doing is we're using this to put our commander's power to where we want it based on the cards we have in hand when our turn starts. So we can get duplicate creatures. Sorry about that, everyone. But I'm glad you got to hear me talk about Forgotten Ancient because I love that card. So we've talked about our evasion section. Let's talk now about our protection section. We've seen both of these already. Tyrant Guard, if we sacrifice it, all of our creatures with counters get hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. And Kogla, of course, can bounce a human, protecting that human, and becoming indestructible itself. So 2 protections for the price of 1 and a green. Next is our recursion section. These are ways for us to get cards back from the graveyard, or rather back onto the battlefield after they've already been on it. Hormigaunt Horde, of course, we can get a landfall trigger and pay 2 and a green to put it back in our hand once it's in our graveyard. Broodguard Elite, we get to recur it by warping it in, and then it goes to exile, and we can play it again. And then Evolution Witness, which is so good in our deck. 2 and a green for a 2/1 Elf Shaman Mutant. It does not have Evolve, it has Adapt. Adapt, rather, for 1 and a green. Adapt 2 means if it has no creatures on, or no counters on it, you put 2 counters on it, 2 1/1 counters on it. And whenever 1 or more 1/1 counters are put on this creature, we return target permanent card from our graveyard to our hand. That does not have to be with its adaptability. Remember, the adaptability only works if it has no 1/1 counters on it. Now, we can activate it as many times as we want, but it will only put 2 counters on itself if it didn't have counters otherwise. It's not like we have to have 0 counters on it in order to adapt it. It just won't do anything if we adapt it when there's counters already on it. In any case, if we're putting counters on it from its adaptability or in any other way, anytime we put counters on it, doesn't matter how many, we can get a permanent card back from our graveyard to our hand. Then we put any number of counters on it again, that event lets us get a permanent card back from our graveyard to our hand again. So being able to do this multiple times, maybe we have an ornery tumblewag in play, we just keep putting counters on the witness and keep getting things back from the graveyard, pretty nice. So that's our recursion section. Let's talk about synergy and tokens and Wincons. We put them all together. So Terra Symbiosis is the only one in our synergy section. It synergizes because it lets us draw cards when we put counters on things. It just rewards us for putting counters on things. That's pretty nice. Now, it's not the only card in our synergy section on this page, just in our deck. Like I mentioned at the top of the video, there is a considering section at the bottom of the page below the deck list that has cards in it that are also tagged, and there are some other synergy cards there. This is just the only one that I felt really fit well into this version of the deck. For our token section, we've seen Ether Channeler and how it can make us a 1/1 bird. There are plenty of other cards in the token section, again in the considering section of our Moxfield page, but we are also running Octomancer. Octomancer is 3, a green and a blue, for a 3/3 frog druid. Look how happy he is. They are, whoever this is. It has Gift an Octopus, which means when we cast it, we may promise an opponent a gift. And if we do, when the Octomancer enters, they will make an 8/8 blue octopus creature token. So we can just give an opponent an 8/8 if we want to. That's a nice political choice in this deck. Normally, you would do this to benefit you, and we'll talk about how in a moment. But in this deck, we don't really need to gift this octopus. We have lots of other tokens we can make. But if we want to, it's a nice political choice, or maybe we want to use it for our own benefit too. Both are possible. Because at the beginning of each end step, the Octomancer will create a token that is a copy of target creature token that entered the battlefield this turn. So it has to be a token that we're copying, and it has to have entered the battlefield this turn. Much like Trommel, Seymour's Butler, cares about non-token creatures that entered the battlefield this turn. However, this is sort of letting us, populate a little bit? Being able to make a copy of a token copy of a token we already control. It just has to have entered the battlefield this turn, and it happens at the beginning of each end step. So as long as we have cast a spell with mana value equal to our commander's current power, we're going to get a copy of that spell, which is going to resolve and become a token. And then at the end step, the Octomancer can make a token copy of that token, that creature token. So yeah, really nice. Being able to, not all the time, but essentially make it so even though Jackal is giving us 1 copy, we're ending up with 2 copies beyond just the original. Octomancer is very nice. And again, we can give octopi to people, or octopuses. Octopus? Lots of different ways to think of the plural on this. I know some people think it's octopoda. There's a cool book I read that says octopus is the actual best plural. But don't trust me. Trust what you research online. I just think maybe we need more of these 8/8s. Finally, for our Wincon section, we have Simic Ascendancy. We've already seen it. We love it. We want to run it in our deck. So that covers all of the spells in our deck. As usual, we're going to go over our land base. So we are running 21 basics. I want to make sure we can get our pips early on. The mix of our colors is a little more heavy toward green than blue than this mix of 13 to 8 here. But when that's the case, I want to make sure our 2-drop commander is definitely going to be able to be played on turn 2. So I weighted a little bit more toward blue than the mix of the spells in our deck would suggest, just to ensure that we definitely have a chance to get an island or something else that can produce blue in play by turn 2. So we're running Simic Growth Chamber. This is a bounce land. If you haven't seen bounce lands, they tap for 2 mana, 1 of each of our colors. Except they come in tapped, and when they do, we have to return a land we control to its owner's hand. So if we were to just play the Simic Growth Chamber on turn 1, it has to bounce itself since it's the only land we control. However, if we have some basics in play, for example, we can tap them first for mana and then play the Growth Chamber and bounce those lands and just float the mana and use them on something else. And when we do that, what's nicest about these bounce lands is that we're not behind on mana, even though one of our lands has left the battlefield, because the Growth Chamber makes 2, and we've put a land in our hand, so we're definitely going to be able to make our land drop next turn. Seems great. We are running Hinterland Harbor. It's a check land, which means it taps for both of our colors, and it enters tapped unless we control a forest or an island. And 21 of the cards in our deck are forests or islands, so we're pretty likely to be able to cast or to be able to play this untapped. But if we want to upgrade a little bit, we can play Dreamroot Cascade instead, which is a slow land. Slow lands come in untapped as long as they are not the first or second land we've played in the game. As long as we control 2 or more other lands. So those are more likely to consistently come in untapped, but Hinterland Harbor in this deck is pretty likely to come in untapped as well. And it's much cheaper than that slow land. So we're also running 2 filter lands. Overflowing Basin does not tap for mana on its own. You have to pay a mana into it and tap it, and it will make 2 mana. So we're tapping 2 mana sources, maybe another basic, to pay for this, and the basin itself, and we're getting 2 mana, so it's not like a ramp, but it does give us our colors, and that's pretty nice. Flooded Grove, on the other hand, comes in untapped, and it taps for colorless on its own. Or if we put a green or a blue into it, we can tap it and make either 2 green, 2 blue, or 1 of each. So this filters into whatever colors we want, and it taps for mana on its own, as opposed to the Overflowing Basin. The only thing that's worth noting here is that in order to make that colored mana with Flooded Grove, we have to pay colored mana into it. Whereas Overflowing Basin can make colored mana, and we can put colorless mana into it with this generic mana cost. Otherwise, Flooded Grove would be strictly better than Overflowing Basin. It usually is better, and that's why it costs a little bit more. But yeah, both of these are helpful to us. And if we wanted to upgrade these, we could go to a different kind of dual land, like Breeding Pool, the Shock land. We are running 5 fixing lands. We start with Command Tower because this is an untapped land that makes one of the colors of mana in our commander's color identity. Pretty good. Just makes blue and green, comes in untapped for sure. Sounds good to me. We're also running Path of Ancestry, which comes in tapped, but makes 1 mana of a color in our commander's color identity. So this is just a tap land in our colors, so why do we like this better? Well, because if we use the mana from it to cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander, we scry 1. As I'm sure you know, our commander shares types with itself. So if we use this mana to cast our commander, we definitely get the scry. We also have 5 other humans in this deck, so we'll be able to get scries off of them as well. We don't have any other scientists or villains, but we do have the 5 other humans, and that's pretty good. We are running Temple of the False God. I know some people don't like this land. I think it's great. This is a soul land. It comes in untapped, and it taps for 2 colorless mana, just like a Soul Ring, except that we have to control 4 other lands beyond it, so 5 lands including itself, in order to activate it at all. So that means it's not a Soul Ring in the sense that we can just tap it as soon as it comes in, unless it's later in the game. Which means it's not an early soul land, but it is still a land that taps for 2 mana, and that is ramp even if it's not early in our game. Totally worth it for the kind of decks that I build. We're also running 2 soft fetches. Broker's Hideout is a land that when it enters, we immediately sacrifice it, and we can search for a basic forest or island, or plains, but it's not relevant in our deck, then put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle, and gain a life. This gains us a life, which is kind of nice, but it's really just a land that's a rampant growth for us immediately. We could have run something like Vibrant Cityscape or Evolving Wilds or Terramorphic Expanse if we really cared about being able to manipulate the top of our library and get a free shuffle when we needed it, sort of hold that up, fetch land style. But I would rather just run the Broker's Hideout and just be done with it, get ourselves a forest or island tapped, and move on. We don't have any benefit from holding up a crackable fetch land, so just let it crack itself. Also, just to be clear, I know you have heard, if you're not aware of color identity rules, that we can't have actual plains cards in our library because they produce white mana. But this just says the word plains, so Broker's Hideout does not violate our commander's color identity rule. We also run Myriad Landscape. This is a land that enters tapped and taps for colorless. We can also pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic land cards that share a land type, which means in this deck 2 islands or 2 forests, both basics. Then put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. So while this is very slow, it comes in tapped, we have to pay and sacrifice it, and then the basics we get are all tapped. This is one land drop that we're turning into 2 lands, so it's ramp. It's slow ramp, but it does ramp us. Next, we are running Yavimaya Coast. This is a pain land. It taps for colorless, it does come in untapped, but it can also tap for colored mana, either one that we need, if we're willing to have it do 1 damage to us. The way that these normally play out is, usually we're tapping it for colorless mana. Usually we have plenty of colored pips from our other mana sources to be able to cast the spells we need, but if we desperately need a green or a blue, it's worth the 1 damage in that moment, because it won't be every turn. And even if it is, even if we pay, I don't know, 8 mana into the, or 8 damage, 8 life to Yavimaya Coast in the form of taking the damage from it, over the course of a game, we probably needed that mana, and so it's worth being able to play the game and lose a little life than try and protect our life, or just like 1 damage at a time, and not be able to cast our spells. We are running Bark Channel Pathway because I love the pathways. This is an untapped land that taps for green, or we can play it on the backside, and it's Tide Channel Pathway, and it's an untapped land that taps for blue. I love the pathways because they give you the flexibility of being whatever you happen to need at that moment. It's also nice because in a deck that also runs bounce lands, if we were to play Tide Channel Pathway early on, because let's say we need some blue, and then we play our Simic Growth Chamber later, we could bounce that Tide Channel Pathway, and now it's in our hand, and we can play it on its front face instead and get green. So, not a play pattern that's going to come up a lot, but it's worth knowing. We're running a Scryland. This is Temple of Mystery. It comes in tapped, and when it does, we scry 1, and of course it taps for green or blue. So, unlike Path of Ancestry, this comes in tapped and it scries right away, but it only gives us the 1 scry, not based on us casting creatures that share a type with our commander. So, a little more consistency for the scry, but not as many scries over the course of the game, perhaps. Worth running both. And if you want something that's a little bit stronger, you can always run the Surveil land Hedge Maze. It'll let you surveil when it comes in, and it also has the land types of island and forest. The last section we're going to go over are our 5 utility lands. I like to run Demolition Field in my decks because even though we don't want to do any mass land denial, it's okay to have a single source, just one, of land removal on a problematic land that our opponent's running. Maybe a Glacial Chasm that means we can't do any damage to someone. Maybe they are a Voltron deck and they're running Rogue's Passage, so we can't block their commander. Demolition Field comes in untapped and taps for colorless. Or we can pay, we can pay 2, tap and sack it to destroy a non-basic that our opponent controls. They can then go search for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped and shuffle. And so can we. So both players get a basic, assuming they have basics left in their library, and those basics come in untapped, so neither of us are down a land. We're just not having to deal with a land that is so advantageous to our opponent that it's worth blowing up. Not really that polite to blow up someone's, dual land just because it's a dual land. But if someone's running a Maze of Ith or something that's really bothering us or stopping us from advancing our game plan, it's worth demo fielding it. We're running Karn's Bastion as well. Comes in untapped, taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to proliferate. So we get to add more counters to our things. Just a nice source of proliferation and extra counters in our land pace. We're running Mosswort Bridge because we're a little heavier on green. Mosswort Bridge enters tapped and taps for green, but it has Hideaway 4, which means when it enters, we look at the top 4 cards of our library and exile one of them face down under the bridge, and then put the rest on the bottom of our library in a random order. That one that's face down, if we want, we can pay a green and tap Mosswort Bridge when we have a total power of 10 or greater among creatures we control. And if we do that, we can play the exiled card without paying its mana cost. Now, that is great because it says play. So if it's a land we put under our Mosswort Bridge, we can make our land drop with it if we want to. But even better is if it's a spell, because it says, as long as our creatures have a total power of 10 or greater, all of our creatures, then we can play this spell, we can cast the spell without paying its mana cost. That doesn't change its mana value, which means maybe our commander has gotten up to, a power of 6, and we put a 6-drop creature under Mosswort Bridge. As long as we have enough power among our creatures, we pay a green, tap the Mosswort Bridge, and cast that 6-drop without paying its mana cost, but it's still a 6-drop, so our commander still gets a counter and still copies it. So it may not happen every time with Mosswar Bridge, but what if this were to be a 3-drop or a 4-drop, you know? It's not unlikely that we're going to be able to get plenty of other creatures in play that eventually get a total power of 10 or greater, and maybe we can get a copy of it with our commander. Or we just get a free spell, or not really free, we're paying essentially 2 mana for it, but much discounted. We're running Nesting Grounds, of course. Nesting Grounds comes in untapped and taps for colorless, but we can also pay 1 and tap it to move a counter from a permanent we control onto another permanent. Activate only as a sorcery. It does not say another target permanent we control. So we can move counters from our permanents onto permanents of our opponents. Again, it's a little political choice. It may be something that someone wants. We can only do it as a sorcery, so we can't mug up combat mat with this, but we sure can make someone steal. However, we can also use this to move a counter off of our commander, or onto him, of course, but just say we want to move it off of our commander, and we can put it on another permanent. That means we can put it on Nesting Grounds if we want to, or on any one of our other lands. It's nice to be able to use it to store counters that way in case we want to use them later on. Finally, because we have a trampling commander that gets really big, we're running Rogue's Passage. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it, and target creature can't be blocked this turn. Of course, it's his target creature, not target creature we control, so we can make a deal with someone and say, look, if you attack, if you attack opponent B, opponent A, then once you have attacked, I will activate Rogue's Passage and make your creature unblockable. I'm not going to do it before combat because you might attack me with it. We can make that deal. But again, we're more likely to use this on our own commander if we're not using our mana to cast spells, because we might be able to just win with commander damage with this. Or maybe we have an enormous Colonian Hydra and we don't want someone to block it with their Death Toucher. So Rogue's Passage will get us in there. So that covers it. Sums it up. Again, I'm released new Avatar Commander deck. I'm going to be releasing new Avatar Commander decks every Thursday through mid-January when the Lorwyn Eclipsed set drops. So let me know in the comments if you'd like to see a specific Avatar Commander or deck style. Thanks for watching, everyone. I had fun going through the Spider-Man commanders. Make sure to like and subscribe, and remember, magic is fun. You should play more Magic.